Welcome to Talk Cosmos, the show where Rose Minahan and her panel of guests bring you leading-edge astrology conversations through a journey of soul growth patterns connecting astrology's energetic cycles. Get ready to understand your path in the cosmic roots of the stars.
Hello, once again. This is Talk Cosmos, leading edge astrology conversations, and we meet every week. And today will be one of our panels that has been going on since 2019, and that's Cosmic Collaboration. And we're talking about what is happening right today. And it'll be the second full moon in Aquarius at the very last degree, 29 degrees, which in itself, some people, and truly speaking, has a significance. And it's forming an interesting pattern in the sky of relationships. So we have this called 29 Aquarius full moon and grand trite. Not trite, my goodness, I was combining words, right? Trine Kite. It's an energy where we have 3 points that are in a flow, 120 degrees. It's like a perpetual engine. And the kite introduces a sextile to one of the points and an opposition to the fourth. And that, if you can see it, great. Otherwise, we'll bring up the chart later. And so there's a pattern of how to relate. And we'll talk about what does that mean, because we all have our ideas. And that'll be fun. But the idea, the backbone of this could be, which I like to think, which we've added to the title, the willingness to innovate. So come thick and thin as we go through these changes, because the first one, and changes, I mean, because there's always change. That's what the energy is in the world. Something I need to remember too. And the first one was at 1 degree, almost a month ago, in Aquarius, because the full moon's always the opposite of the sun. Remember to subscribe. If you subscribed, we're on YouTube, Talk Cosmos YouTube, and it's a podcast 1, as we're featured through 1150 KKNW, but all the podcasts carry us. So, hey, we're excited and we want to reach out, and we will be more and more this year. It's a good dynamic year, and we're so glad to have you. And now we are ready for Cosmic Collaboration.
Investigating the deeper archetypal questions related to understanding astrological energetic aspects for growth patterns to unify mind, body, spirit, and emotions, this is your Cosmic Collaboration panel.
I'm Rose Minahan, host of Talk Cosmos, an evolutionary astrologer and consultant, plus a certified color energy coach. I explore creative expression as an artist, a musician, and write abundantly, stories to poetry. I love investigating mythology's language, philosophizing eternity, and I'm a perpetual student of life, seeing oneness of body, spirit of people, animals, and nature.
I'm Susie Wright, astrologer, certified psychic medium, tarot reader, life coach, and Reiki master. I love to bring what I call cosmic common sense to the world through private sessions as well as all types of media. My work has been published in Chewy.com, Brides Magazine, Good Housekeeping, Cosmopolitan, Elle, Bustle, and more. And I'm a regular guest on Today in Nashville. I've had my own radio shows, and I was the weekly on-air astrologer for WSCA-FM. And I love to teach astrology and psychic development.
And I'm Amanda Pierce, a soul-centered astrologer, astrological consultant, and empowerment-based meditation teacher. I have a BA in psychology, I'm a wellness enthusiast with a passion for healthy eating, and I enjoy creating new realities and shifting old paradigms.
And like the Sufi poet Rumi says, you are the entire ocean in a drop.
Living in Hawaii, this seems more and more real every moment. I was like, thank you, Rumi. And that's only the second stanza. Oops, I just lost my, that's okay. So, the moon, that is a phasal energy. And I think we were going to begin with that. I don't know, Susie, did you have ideas? I mean, was that something you wanted to present? Was the phases, or Anybody?
Well, just talk a little bit, and then if you want me to run through them, I can do that. That's fine. Yeah.
Well, let's do that. Let's start, because
Okay.
it starts with a seed, which actually started between these two full moons. Interestingly, because I've noticed that half the year, the full moon begins the archetypal month. And I always go by the archetypal month. Everything seems to be kind of this stewing pot inside it. However it relates, it's like somewhat adding to our knowledge of that time. And I used to be very connected to it, but now I'm realizing threads, it's like another spice in the pot. It's just going to happen, or herb. So at any rate, so we release with the full moon in order to get to the new moon. But here we have a second time of releasing. So anyway, it starts with a seed. Go ahead and you'll say it more succinctly.
And this is just to give people that don't really, understand the moon cycles a good foundation to understand what we're going to be talking about tonight, and how these cycles come back around. So yes, so in the new moon phase, it's obviously that's where you're planting the seed. Everything, it's underground. And at the crescent moon, that's where things begin to germinate and sprout. Okay, so whether it's ideas or relationships or whatever is going on, the first quarter moon is where. That's where the seedlings kind of really become stronger enough to be get a little more out on their own, I guess you could say. And there's and I'm not going to relate this to individuals. Yeah, we can come back to that, but just the idea. On the gibbous moon, this is where the fruit begins to grow. Okay, so each phase has it's such a distinct and important quality, So now at this point, it may need a little less care and feeding, different care and feeding to it. The full moon then comes in with where the flowers bloom, the fruit ripens, everything. You can see what it is that you've created. On the new moon, you're planting something and it may come up really big and tall and strong, but it may be like, maybe a little something may go wrong in there. So now you get to see what it is that you've created in the full moon. And then we begin the other side of the cycle, which is the disseminating moon. And this is where, the fruit ripens, the seeds drop, the flowers fade, whatever, during that cycle. The third quarter is when this is going into the darker side of the moon. And the third quarter is where the leaves mature, things, things start to change color, in the fall. Who doesn't love to go leaf peeping in the fall? I do. And then finally we reach the phase, and this is one that we're going to be discussing a lot today, is the balsamic phase, which is where the plant more or less dies. It may be a perennial, it may be an annual, but this is where it naturally withdraws. And then the cycle, can start over again, or something new may need to be planted. So that's just a little microcosm of, plant related, because it's easy to understand, of how the moon cycles work. And you can relate those again to anything in your life. It could be the cycle of a relationship, the cycle of a job, the cycle of a project that you're doing, whatever it is. It will have those flavors to it. So,
thank you.
yeah.
Very beautifully, Susie, because the energy does have a pattern, and the moon, the closest object, I call it object because it's not a planet, it reflects, it's a luminary, but we refer to it as a planet, and therefore we use that visual pattern of growth and development with any of the planets. And I really like the idea that you brought into effect that it's on the darker side of the moon, or the darker side of the light, because among the three of us, we were talking about other potential conversations. And the moon has in mythology these three goddesses. And so this is like a segue. I'm thinking for the fall, we might just do that, try to relate are those other goddesses known as the dark goddesses, or life and death, because it is a matter of ending a cycle, balsamic, which you threaded us into so beautifully. That is, and on the other hand, 29 degrees is what they call anoretic, which I personally have a lot in my chart. So it's a little harder to see exactly because you're living it all the time. But the fact is that there's this thought of you could say like the teeter-totter of the moment, where you've really accumulated everything up to that point, so that there's really a lot of holding within it. But then again, you're bursting to go forward to the new. But in my mind, you're still on that precipice of that moment that hasn't yet entered. So it's in, shall we talk about, so it could be the last hurrah but it could be the ending of a contract.
The last hurrah.
Yeah, I think Amanda had said the last hurrah. It's sort of like on the both scale of whoopee, I've got all this that's been manifested in its full potential, and it can be a reclaiming, even if you're releasing, like, oh goody, I see the light, let me release. I mean, yeah, that gets complex, doesn't it?
Well, anybody that has planets, well, I was just going to say, anybody that has planets at 29 degrees in those areas, they're always going to feel like they're on the cusp of starting something new. It's always starting something new. You know, I knew a man who was, that was his, he couldn't integrate that into his consciousness, and he kept going to building these different churches, and then something would happen and he would have to move on and he'd go build another church and start up, and he said, I just can't find anywhere to light. And I'm like, I bet you he's got like some planets that are, like his sun is at 29, he's always starting, and like, but that's what his energy was. He was the starter. He was the one that brought it to fruition, and then it was time for him to move on.
In this particular chart, we have a few patterns, and this was not one that we were going to emphasize a lot, but it was brought up, and I think it's so valuable because it's Pluto square Eris, Eris, that has a 550-year cycle, and it's happened. There's 5 of these squares, and 3 of them were last year, and this is the 4th of 5th, and I've been reminded is so pivotal. The last time that this happened with Capricorn and Aries was back in the Axle Age, which was 300 some BC, when Su Lo and Lao Tzu, I got the name, sorry about this, and Confucius and mega philosophical giants were alive. And so it's really hard to, again, see ourselves in the seed of birthing, but it is a potential of huge, because Eris, the dwarf planet, sister to Pluto actually in mythology, is one of discord, chaos, and the truth teller ultimately. She presents a question in a mythological tale of who's the fairest. So without getting ingrained, which is a whole conversation, but that is like the backdrop of this. One of the importances that now is not just any significant chart. So this, go ahead and speak as you might, but I was trying to segue ourselves into this grand trine. Mm-hmm.
I was just going to say that Eris, as a truth teller, she's not a gentle truth teller. She kind of like smacks you in the face. And then combining that energy with Pluto, it's like, whoa, this is can be quite explosive.
A good point.
Stark reality.
I know.
Yeah.
Even among myself, I think of some of my outbursts, and I think, oh, I have to really think about that. But there is something where you're at that edge of truth, and by gosh, you want to participate. Maybe that's it. Like, what's really going to get unearthed? Well, maybe the clue is further in the pickle, further in the brine, right? So, looking at the grand trine, which happens to be between, and I can pull up the chart. Shall I do that right now? We can see for those that are in our wonderful audience that are able to join us with this. There we go. Okay, it is today, and back east on the East Coast, it's at 8:02 a.m. So you can figure that out with any software. So in other words, the houses may or may not relate. But the blue triangle in the middle is what we're looking at, along with the little pointy down at the bottom, which is the South Node for the Kite that we'll talk about later. But it's Venus, beautiful Venus in her own sign, one of two signs, Libra, very focused on that energy, we could say. Trining the North Node, which is our common destiny, where we're all traveling for, it's a 18-month cycle. We have until January to complete it. And it is 7 degrees in communication, Gemini. And then down in the 5th house, in this chart, it's trined in this little circular energy with Saturn, the timekeeper, these construction, reconstruction, we might say, in Aquarius. It's saying, hey, you know what? Maybe we'll break some of these rules and reformulate. So idea factory.
And Saturn's also in its own sign in this.
Oh, good point.
As the traditional ruler of Aquarius, yeah.
I forget. Yes. So there's a dual signature there, and that's
very strong
important.
Placements. Mm-hmm.
It is. Yes, yes, yes. So I know there's so many ways that just this nation and other nations are working on the mundane, on the greater scheme to try to, well, gee, think about it, with education, kids going to school, and the vaccine, trying to give it to other countries, and trying to get our values, as I would say, with our relationships with Venus, and communicate them, and structure them for people.
Yeah, and if we're talking about the kite here, or
no, we're just talking about the trine at first.
Okay.
We're talking about this trine because the kite's part of it. But do we have anything else we want to say about this? Just the trine, because that's part of the importance of this, is that we have two energies that we're working with, and one of them is the trine.
Well, it's a very constant flow of energy. The trine energy is free flowing, and when you connect 3 points together, it constantly runs, and that there's a lot of potential in that, but it can be challenging to really get the most out of it because it's so easy, and it just runs on its own, and so it's easy to kind of let that potential,
or not be grounded. Would you say that?
Yeah.
I think grounded, because especially in air, we're talking about the air element here, because I know the ideas, that's what I'm saying, is we've got all these ideas, and for one's personal life, it's like we're out of some of the total unknown from the last year with COVID. COVID is our common denominator. It's changed the world. It's continuing to change the world. So we know this. But yet out of it, we're trying so hard. And this in 29 degrees, this chart is really showing how strongly the interconnections with that air connection we're trying to make. So, Susie, did you have any particular thoughts about this, or should we, Amanda was going to?
I was just kind of thinking of people that I know that have a lot of these air trines, and it's just like, it's so hard for them. They're brilliant minds, but it's difficult for them to get into their bodies, like you were saying, and really connect with their
manifest. Yeah.
Well, no, they can manifest like crazy. It's just they can make things happen. They can make things happen pretty rapidly.
Oh, what?
But what's it connected to?
I just realized. Yes, I'm realizing there's a mystic square in here too. And it's with Chiron. Do you see that? Very faint. I mean, in other words, the energies. Yeah. But well, at any rate, let's go into the kite, because I'm thinking of time too, and I appreciate both your feedback. I was thinking about more of what this particular trine is saying and what a kite is saying. That's what I'm trying to say.
Think about what's happening. We have a constant flow of information. Everybody is glued looking for information now, and it won't stop.
Exactly.
And there's absolutely, this is where my information says, this is what I believe, this is what I believe, this is what I believe. It's just, it's locked in, and there's support for that similar thinking.
And coming at it from like a very mental place, like not a body knowing or any type of necessarily knowingness, but it's mental, like what's the information telling me? That's what.
Okay. So we've got, So now introducing the kite, and you can both see this. I've got it on share. I can't see you. Okay. And for those people that are just listening, we are looking at 3 points with North Node with Ceres, the asteroid goddess. Actually, she's not asteroid. She's a dwarf. I won't complicate this. North Node with Venus and Saturn. But then we have the nodes being pulled in strongly, because between Venus and Saturn at 60 degrees, which is a connection, that's how astrology sees it, is the South Node with Juno. And so that's the fire element. That's the spirit. And it's ruled, of course, if we look at rulership, we're going to look at Jupiter, and we're bringing in, but okay, so we have, to me, I'll just introduce, with the kite, we have an opposition. So that we have these two energies now that are so united that we need to navigate. And it used to be thought you had to do one before the other, but the world is looking more at the energy of and both. So it's not really do this and then do that. It's like you can eat a little dessert and then you can have your salad,
Yeah, and one of the ways to look at a grand trine kite is to look at the trine as kind of being like a crossbow, with the sextile aspects being the bowstring. And so it's pulling, like the energy is pulling back and being released from that South Node Juno point and shooting across to the North Node Ceres. And I think we lost the screen.
Well, we lost the screen. Okay.
Yeah. So that would, looking at it in that particular way, it puts a lot of prominence on that Juno South Node and the Ceres North Node, and Ceres being really lit up by that Juno fire energy.
Yes, and I apologize here. I had a little techo problem, so I caught most of that. To me, too, the South Node, as we know, is our common past, the collective common past in our own life and on the larger scale of consciousness. And it in Sagittarius, of course, it has different. We're concerned with our belief systems. We're concerned with, well, for some people, religion, and for some people, cultural biases or cultural, the world at large. But I like to sink that down into our belief systems. And with Juno, it seems alliances. So for me, a lot of our values that we're looking at with our relationships and how we're restructuring our whole life has that focus of what do I need to adjust my belief system? What is feeding into that belief system that might not be serving my direction, of all my experiences. Because with Ceres, she's one of grief and finding ways to nurture ourselves. And so actually in our chart here, because it was in the 9th house, I'd say it also has a lot to do with how am I going to structure with Saturn in a more inclusive philosophy that brings in the wounded, because in that, I guess we haven't gone back to the full moon, new moon chart much. We kind of got into this, but it is Chiron's involved. There's just a lot of emphasis about it hasn't been easy, and we have be more inclusive about how it operates.
Well, and Juno can also represent contracts. So it being conjunct the South Node, this could be a period where we're done with certain contracts in our lives, whether this is something that a contract we made with a person, a family member, or even stemming from past lives. And then when that energy moves over towards Ceres in the North Node, this could be the time when we actually communicate that and kind of reclaim our voice, because Ceres she went through deep loss. So anywhere you see Ceres in your chart, it's about reclaiming what has been lost to you.
Yes, and going back to the full moon itself, because the moon is with Jupiter, and they are in Aquarius. So this is really where it can be very exuberant. We're looking at huge pains, and if you look at the evolutionary side of trauma signature, and huge innovation and huge new growth of possibilities. Yes, I mean Jupiter, a lot of it.
I've been noticing this for the last couple of years with clients, like having this conversation that I normally stick to, like, hey, what's happening in life right now, and what are the nice little things you can do to help yourself. But I've been noticing like this really deep releasing the past, those DNA cycles, those ancestral cycles. There are a lot, and that stuff has been coming through so much lately. And I would say probably really, really hard in the last couple of years. People literally breaking cycles, and
Wow.
And familial cycles, and it's and it's scary, when you point it out. It's like people kind of freak out. They're like, what am I doing? And I'm like, you're already doing it. Like, you don't need to do anything. So there's an unconscious agreement, maybe this is part of the new soul contract that's coming in, that this is happening, and we're doing it whether we're aware of it or not.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
We will be back. This is a perfect way to reintroduce. This is Cosmic Collaboration Talk Cosmos, and today is the 22nd of August. I'm with Susie Wright and Amanda Pierce. I'm Sue Rose Minahan, and thank you. We want to continue this about what is our full moon today, the 29 degree of Aquarius, with this leading edge conversation. Thank you.
While we take a break from this week's edition of Talk Cosmos, let's take a look at this cycle's archetype. We are currently in the Yang period of Leo, ruled by the solar sun. Having departed from a cycle based on the internal process of emotional attachments requiring security and safety, the energy of Leo externally manifests our legacy through children and artistic creations. As a fixed Yang fire sign that desires to ignite actualization, Leo the lion takes the risk to generously exhibit love and welcome all to share their stage with joyous pleasure for living life.
Talk Cosmos brings you leading-edge astrological conversations with hour-long programs each week on KKNW. The show goes live every Sunday from 1 to 2 p.m. Pacific. Talk Cosmos weekly programs are also available to watch live on Facebook and YouTube, along with daily chats throughout the week on the Talk Cosmos YouTube channel. While you're there, make sure you click like and subscribe buttons so you can get the full Talk Cosmos experience. Or, if you'd rather listen to the show archives with audio only, the entire podcast collection since 2018 is available on most podcast carriers. So, grab your coffee, tea, or kombucha and enjoy the show.
Hello, this is Madam Simon, archetypal astrologer and tarot reader, and you're listening to Talk Cosmos on Alternative Talk 1150 AM, where we unveil astrology's ancient archetypes that continually build the collective experiences in our unconsciousness.
Wondering what's on next on Alternative Talk 1150? Check out 1150kknw.com.
Oh, I have a major reset to my audience and everybody. Today is August 8th. Isn't today August 8th?
Yep.
Yeah, and thank you. It's not the 22nd. We're talking about the full moon on the 22nd. Today is the new moon. Today is the day that we're reseeding things. Oh my gosh. You know, I am in Hawaii, and I must say for me, I'm not always great with time on this plane anyway. I have to adjust to all the time zones, and I'm finding my whole calendar, it's quite a bit of chaos. So let me clarify. Today is the new moon being seated in Leo, which is also monumental. So we are at that teeter-totter point, we might say, between the last full moon and the next full moon. So right now we can see the wisdom of what we might want to release, I don't know, from the last, anyway, or project into growth, right? So I wanted... Mm-hmm.
Oh, I just love that you're bringing up the fact that it is the new moon, because it is that seed point for this full moon that's coming up that we're talking about. And so I just wanted to mention that with this new moon, the sun-moon conjunction is square Uranus. So that's a really big aspect, and there could be new awareness coming in, kind of an awakening or a shift in perspective that is then going to blossom and bloom at the full moon. So that's just something to take into consideration.
Yes. Well, going back to this familiar, go ahead. But Susie,
I just said I'm ready.
Yeah. I wanted to pick up the thread that we left with about the familiar cycles. I know for myself, I can well testify that I have, my mother passed last year, so of course it's a natural time, but it is a very strong factor for that I'm recognizing, and the growth potential in it, because you know it, and I think it relates very much with the COVID, that in releasing there's I don't know what it is, but always in releasing there is some sorrow. And if you're going to feel that, because it's been
series,
it's attachment too. It's the attachment part. But if one can just go through it in order to see the potential of the new structure. And we're really still in that pattern, or I don't know about pattern, but we're in that development.
And you got to go through it to fully release it so that you don't manifest forward the same lesson that you may have had, that you learned and are now able to release.
And that has a lot to do with the body, because if we keep it in the head phase, it's like, yeah, we got it down. But then when practice comes up, it's like, like it's a different factor of which we know, but yet it's the experience. It's totally the experience. So limiting beliefs, that is what this next ending of contracts will be. And I think that says very, it ties together what we had said in the beginning. So it could be, what's our internal loyalty and fears with people based on family and friends? Because I think, Susie, you had brought up, and this is what what we've been discussing, is it with people, you brought up the factor too, that releasing these loyalties that we have is part of it. Or if that's not resonating, that's fine.
Yeah. No, we get that's the thing, and and again, tying it back into the series energy, it's like this. This stuff doesn't come easy, but eventually, it's like you have to make that. It's like there's a certain amount that's out of your control. How you and whether or not you accept it is what's going to bring you any kind of comfort, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's still going to feel great.
Right. And this is
That's right.
This is like a really emotional full moon. I mean, a full moon is emotional anyways. It's like the moon is at its brightest, but then it's at 29 degrees. I mean, that's like full expression of that energy. And then the moon is conjunct Jupiter. It's just expanded even more.
It is true.
There's just a lot of, there's going to be a lot of emotional pull to do what we want and to get that freedom, because that's what the Aquarius moon so wants. It wants its freedom. And
Yep.
Ceres as well is the higher octave of the moon. So it's got that emotional nature as well. And so in a way, we're going towards that with the North Node. So it's important to heed your emotions and maybe not go out of control. I mean, it is also 29 Leo, the sun. So that
Drama.
can be exactly. Yeah.
Well, let's look at the.
I
a lot
hate
of
to say
potential
that
for
about
that.
Leo, but they're just so good at it.
They really
love
are.
Leo. I love Leo.
Well, let's look at. Well, it does feel there's joy and there's potential of just expression of generosity, just like the sun's giving everything. Can you see right now, or do I need to share? I think I need to share.
Yeah.
Let's look at the United States, because this moon is very close to our moon in the United States. When I say our moon, the other people are in other parts of the country. They're not United States citizens, but yet we are part of this current world. And,
Most people are affected by the United States.
Yeah, and we're affected by everybody, thankfully. So yes, so this is a Sible chart. There are several charts. We're going to get into that at a later date. There's other charts that are considered for the United States, which is fascinating. But this one has been considered very popular, and it's at 5:10 p.m. in Philadelphia on July 4th, when it was 1776. So as you can see, it has 12 degrees rising, which is ruled by Jupiter. So this full moon with the moon in Jupiter has extra potential. And it's our rule. It's the ruling how we're navigating our actions, you could say. And also, you'll notice that the moon at 29 degrees extra with change, as they say, is conjunct our natal moon, the United States natal moon, at 27 degrees, within 2 degrees. Orb, it's very potent. It's emotionally a pathway that we can find is, because in consciousness, we have the individual consciousness and the collective consciousness, and increasingly the individual, of course, they relate. Okay, I want to stop and hear what you guys have to say.
Well, I think what's most striking about this chart is that the full moon North Node is almost exactly on the United States Uranus.
In the 6th house.
In the 6th house, yeah. So that's really, something's going to be shaken up here.
And it does, a good point. And with Uranus, of course, it's innovation. I think that's leading on the positive, like we said, willingness to innovation. And there's clues in all over here where that is a huge potential. But
So I was just looking at the 5th house, what it rules in mundane, and of course it actually rules public school system, ambassadors, government representatives, children, of course, children, and entertainment. So wow, lot of really interesting things.
yes,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
transiting Uranus, which is that change factor, we know, the chaos, unexpected, is in the 5th house here natally on this chart, and it has that year-long square with Saturn that's also in its own sign. In other words, between the old and the new rulers of our structure and breaking the structure.
Yep.
Yes. And so it's very much exactly what we're all looking for. And out of that, the creativity, which there is more creativity when it's in mutable signs, such as our natal in Gemini. I mean, we are about ideas, new ideas. How are they manifesting? And so, yes, being connected to that North Node point, which is really potent, because if we try to imagine how this is relating to the kite that we're talking about, it's back to that South Node of our philosophy that's so close to our ascendant. So how are we acting in our world? And of course, education is getting a large thrust of this here. Like, boy, the parents with the kids, and I'm not even saying how I'm just full of compassion. And more than compassion, though, it's to be very objective. It's so interesting to see the dynamics. There is part of me that just tries to look at it on a witnessing platform so that I can try to understand later the dynamics. Because, when everything is so chaotic with so much input, how can you really understand it unless you just look back and see how this is occurring? But it's fundamental that we have education and that we provide it. And how, anyway, it's one of the big, that, and of course the cultural. We've been the melting pot. So we think of the world, and how is that affecting us? We have huge thoughts.
Well, I'm just going to go back to the Uranus again, because I'm one thing I noticed just looking at this right now is that because we've got that North Node conjunct Uranus, it connects into that grand trine and that kite. And what I really like about that is that Saturn is trining Uranus. So transiting Saturn is trining the United States Uranus. And I feel like that, to me, feels like it's very, it's going to ground the energy a bit more and give it a little more potential for things to manifest in a good way. Plus the Venus, I just really like that Venus-Saturn trine. I mean, they're such strong planets, and there's a lot of potential to tap into that energy.
And Venus, right now in the sky, and one of her signs of Libra, of relationships and extremes, you could say, because it's me and the other, and how are they manifesting, is approaching, you could say, wanting to connect with our common cultural, if we look at the United States, not just politically, but who we are as a nation that we come from. And I'm speaking as one of those citizens in the United States, as you say, with its own Saturn of structure. But what I like is that Saturn, with its structure, has structure, right? It's the building blocks. It's the foundational four corners. It's our spine. But sometimes the spine needs adjustments, or else the vertebrae get crunched, and it isn't perfect all the time. It needs to get readjusted. And right now, that is what the emphasis is working on, I think, is really through, and it can come from different factors. Obviously, this one, if you look at the chart, is in the 10th house of society. So rules and authorities and government are trying to really do that. But in the background, all the people, and we are talking about the moon that represents the people, are what eventually we trust is going to be implementing with their feelings and what they want. It is a matter of getting involved. So, participating.
Sorry.
No,
there was another piece of this too, and I don't know if we wanted to go into this or not, or if that's where we're going. But the U.S. I was just looking at the U.S. chart, and so it was born under a full moon cycle, and now it's currently by progression in the balsamic cycle. Is that correct? Am I crazy with that?
No, no, it wasn't full moon because it
Was it full
can
moon?
you
All right.
can
And I
you
must have
see
had the
this?
wrong chart.
No. Well, can you see it right now on our chart?
I was just looking it up in the one that I have in Solar Fire.
Well,
so,
no, because we have the sun is 13 degrees
balsamic.
Cancer. Well, it's Cancer. It's in a Cancer, and we have it's an Aquarius moon. So it's approaching it's in between.
It's approaching the last square, right?
Yeah, it's approaching a square in Aries, but it has 15 degrees to go. So I mean, there's others. In other words, they're not easily. I think it's very idealistic in Aquarius because Aquarius is the community. It wants to improve conditions, and but it can be elitist because who is your community? And I think that is what everything is being said. When we look at the world and we even look at our own life, who's in our community? Who do we want in our community? And who will we accept into the community? If you look at the Olympics that happened, I mean, there's so many new sports that one might think, is that really Olympics or not? But yes, in other words, it's inclusive. It's and this. So that has been, I think, for me, the biggest part is the need to embrace on a wide scale, on a personal scale, what has not been like oneself. Look further, look at the values. If we're looking at Venus in the other side of Venus, besides relationships, is Taurus of values. Look at common denominator and raise those values, make it more apparent and possible for everybody. But, one other factor here is Mars. Mars is squaring Mars. You could say immutable signs. It's approaching that. One's in Gemini of our thoughts, and the other is in Virgo. That's both ruled by Mercury, but is saying, hey, right now it's like, okay, you got all these great ideas. Fine. How are we going to distill them? Like, how are we going to put a little practicality of Earth basis into this? And so that could be innovative. But not so easy to get there, yes?
Yeah, it's really interesting that the sun is pretty closely conjunct the United States Hygeia as well. So, of course, we're going to be seeing health and hygiene up again.
Yeah.
I mean, not that it's ever not these days, but it'll definitely be in the spotlight.
Shall I swap this? I'm going to swap it, everybody. We're going to put the event, which is the full moon that we're talking about, in 2 weeks. Today is August 8th. This is the 22nd at 8:02 a.m. Eastern Time. And it shows, because this way it shows the event that's happening and how is the country relating to it. So it still has the full moon that we're talking about at 29 degrees conjunct our nations at 27, but it's in the 6th house of health, of daily routines along, and it is this with Jupiter. So, and it does show that here it's wanting to talk about Mercury. So really Mercury is the ruler of this natural chart. Yeah, thinking about what it wants to do.
And a lot of potential for, like you were mentioning, innovation with that Jupiter in the full moon chart is exactly conjunct the United States Pallas, which is conjunct our natal moon in Aquarius. So natally, the United States has a moon Pallas conjunction, and that Jupiter is really right on top of it. So a lot of potential for strategizing kind of new thinking or just getting really creative strategically about things. So this the kite energy is not always the easiest energy, and so we've got that right up on the United States Uranus, and so there is, this could be a challenging time for the country, but it could be that these challenges start to spark something that will come to fruition at a later date.
Yes, and if the Sabian symbols, I know that with the Moonbeam team, we talked about that a bit, and that would have been a couple of weeks ago. So for those people that are subscribing to Talk Cosmos YouTube channel, you can easily just click and look at that. And there were 3 points. The Sabian symbol, Mark Edmund Jones, it's an interesting description of the energies. And so the one is at 30 degrees, but if we look at the one before and after, it's like the one before is the karma point, and it's a butterfly emerging. And then the Sabian symbol itself is 30 degrees, and it's rooted in the past of ancient culture, a spiritual brotherhood. And the next one, the quest, which would be 1 degree Pisces in this case, because of course we're talking about the moon, is a crowded marketplace with a lot of products. And so on a spiritual basis, for just looking at that as maybe some information that's cluing us in, it is showing perhaps this chaos that we're having. If we look at this whole backdrop of Pluto square Eris, which is the 4th time in Aries and Capricorn, which is go ahead, forward, separate, be the pioneer with against the structure of things. It's birthing. We're in a birthing process, and a chance to, yes. Sorry, folks. One of you.
Yeah. And I mean, it's plus with that Eris Pluto square. I mean, it's really close to our natal, the United States natal Pluto as well. So,
oh yes,
it's just like there's a lot of potential for growth, I guess. I mean, that's the nice way of putting it. And Susie, I'm curious, do you know if the 6th house in mundane, does that relate to the workers?
Yeah, it's gonna be anything, unions, things like that. Yeah,
so that makes sense with
military too.
Military. Mm-hmm.
Okay, with the natal, the United States natal Uranus in the 6th house, it's like workers revolting. So this, I mean,
civil service,
that's
people
a potential outcome of how this full moon can play out.
And if we look at the United States nodes, which is part of this grand Kite Trine that we've been talking about. So but with this relating to this full moon with our natal, I'm trying to express it for those people that are not seeing what I'm seeing, because I'm looking at the visual. But look, and this 5th house in this particular one that I swapped with the event in the middle with our South Node, Saturn conjunct, in other words, the transit right now at 8 degrees Aquarius, because it stays in Aquarius now for about 3 years. We have another 2.5 years to go. And it is, it's in relationship with releasing, because South Node besides a moon is what we were trying to release in order to integrate the next going ahead. So what you were saying about the structures, regrouping those structures. I'm going to swap it back and then I'm going to stop sharing because we only have a few minutes. And next week will be Planet Buzz. So do subscribe, continue with our leading edge conversations here in astrology. And I'm with Susie Kara Wright and Amanda Pierce. Susie Kara Wright's from Tennessee, Nashville, and Amanda's in Seattle, Washington. And you can find them both at Talk Cosmos. Just go there and all the bios are up and you can connect with anybody and always talk to us. Oh my goodness, we don't have much time. I'm going to stop sharing. So, yes, thoughts. If you had something thinking, we've said so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is innovative. And I think that's what it is. It's hard to piece all the thoughts together, isn't it, with innovation? But we got to keep working. It's in the future, right? We're talking ahead of the time.
Yeah, and just to bring it back to the Leo Aquarius dynamic, because that's what the full moon is based upon, is we're kind of like, it's finding that balance between what our heart wants and what's the greatest good for the community.
Oh, perfectly said with a Leo Aquarius soul. Thank you, Amanda and Susie and our audience. Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us on Talk Cosmos, the show where Rose Minahan and her panel of guests connect soul growth patterns with the energetic cycles of astrology. Be sure to tune in next Sunday at 1 p.m. Pacific Time to continue your journey through the roots of the cosmic pathway.